Well, welcome everyone to this Business Sweden hosted event live from the UN Climate Conference COP26 here in Glasgow, UK. I'm Nick Nuttall, I'm a presenter with We Don't Have Time TV, and before that I was the Director of Communications of the UN Environment Programme in Nairobi and also the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Many actors, including governments and businesses and cities and regions, are setting net zero targets for 2050. And this is very, very important. It's not 97% emission reduction, it's not 90% or 91%, it's net zero in 2050. This is what is happening. But climate action is not just about 2050. It has to be in the here and now. It has to be happening today because we know, and science advises us, that we need to halve our emissions by 2030 to have a decent chance of actually hitting the net zero in 2050 and meeting the goals and aspirations of the Paris Climate Agreement. In this session, we will explore short-term target setting and action happening, and action that needs to happen in the next 2 to 3 years domestically and internationally. Let me first now introduce our amazing speakers. We've got Anders Langworth, Head of Sustainability of Nordea. We have Marie, fantastic, Marie Aglert, who's Director, Head of Business Area Large Corporates, CTCN, which stands for the Swedish Export Credit Agency. And we have Johan Henningsson, Head of Sustainability at SEK, the Swedish Export Credit Corporation. Welcome everybody indeed for being here and finding the time. It's quite busy right now, yeah? So we're going to open up with a panel discussion, but first I'm going to ask one question that really covers sort of everybody. And I stared at this question because it was written for me actually, rather than I writing it, and I hope I've got it right. The opening question to you all is respectively, how do you drive necessary change within sustainability in your organization towards your customers and stakeholders? Now I looked at that, it could also be, how do you drive the necessary change on sustainability in your organization while at the same time driving it among your customers and your stakeholders? So how do you feel about those two questions? They're pretty similar. Who would like to start with that?
I can go first?
Yes, that would be super. Thank you.
And I think, as you say, what's happened now in the industry is that we see a lot of commitments. We see today new commitments, and we have very many alliances setting net zero targets.
Yeah.
Great start, but as you say, that is very far ahead, 2050. So now what a few banks have started to do, which is part of all these alliances, is actually to set more specific targets in the mid or near term. 2030, for instance, Nordea has set a carbon reduction targets of 40 to 50% in both the investments and the financing portfolios. That's going down to how we operate today, because that is the objective. We are heading towards 2030 and we're doing it quite fast actually. So now we are working with full integration into the core processes. It's not just about having green loans or helping the customers with green bonds. It's really tapping into the credit process and the investment processes. And that's also how we, in the end of the day, help the customers. Because we want to be there to support them and provide them with the solutions to transition towards 2030. So that's our absolutely key focus on a daily basis. And really, as you said, it's here and now. We're not waiting until 2025 to start this journey. We have started it and we are accelerating it for every week that goes by actually.
And some of your customers are not just in Sweden, right? They're all around the world.
Well, customers, we're a Nordic bank. We have large corporate customers in our home markets, the Nordic countries primarily, but then also we are an investor. We invest in 4,000 to 5,000 companies across the globe. Yeah. So in that perspective, we have a local responsibility to support our customers, which are in many cases, of course, also global companies. But we invest all over the world. So big responsibility and big task.
Thanks very much indeed there, Anders. Marie or Johan, would you like to take that over after this?
Absolutely. So we represent the export credit system in Sweden. So we have a mission together to actually export, to finance the export industry and also the clients to the export industry all over the world. So mainly together, the Export Credit Guarantee Board provides guarantees, and SEK, we are the bank, so we provide the financing, which we raise on the capital markets. And we very often together fund, and together with other banks, fund very big projects all over the world, and mainly in the developing countries. So we see a huge task in actually accelerating our finance, because we know today if we're going to sort of reach the targets of the trillions, we are moving from billions to trillions. And if we're going to reach those targets, we need to actually double the amount of project financing in the world as it is today. So we need to step up every project finance, and we need to redirect it towards renewable energy. So I think these net zero alliances and the commitments and the targets, long-term targets, are very, very important, and specifically important for financial actors, because we are used to sort of quite a short-term sort of perspective as an industry. So once we've taken that, we need to, as you say, we need to integrate this into our businesses. And I fully agree, and that is hard work. There's really hard work. So we need to get the climate into how we evaluate risk, and how when we do that, we also set a different price on what is good for the climate and what is not. So we need to sort of go away from fossil and price out fossil, and get into and price in the green.
I mean, maybe there's a follow-up here, or maybe Marie, you just want to say something in response to this overall question, because no, I'm just interested because, I mean, Sweden emerges in many people's eyes as a really green, clean, fantastically, we all kind of aspire a bit to be Swedish, when it comes to environmental issues, right? And, but does it mean when you set these high standards as a bank or as export and credit organizations, that you're prepared to lose some business with some customers if they won't play ball with your standards? Because this is always a big tension in the world about other countries with different standards, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think first of all, I would just like to explain a little bit about what we do. Since we are a state agency with a mission and a task to promote Swedish export and internationalization of Swedish industry. And we have been in business since 1933, it's a long time, and we have a very close cooperation with Swedish corporations. The Swedish corporates have come very far, as you mentioned, when it comes to the green technology. You have the electrified vehicles, renewables, green steel, etc. And we see ourselves as a tool to get that technology out in the world, also to developing countries.
Yeah.
I think that's a challenge. And yes, that's an opportunity. And when you ask the question, how do you drive sustainability? I have been working with international banks for many years now, and I've seen a clear shift from focusing on doing no harm. We finance, we make sure we don't break any international regulations. But today is a different story, and I think that's when it really accelerates. Now it's about doing business.
Yeah.
I can see that the banks now see this as a business opportunity. So, and I think that's a change when it comes to sustainability. But yes, there's opportunities, but we have also been very bold on taking actions. And as Johan mentioned, CTCN and SEK, the Swedish export credit system, has come very far when it comes to reaching the Paris Agreement 1.5 degrees. And we have taken it to sub-goals, and we have taken bold steps. We were one of the first export credit systems to stop guaranteeing financing for coal extraction, for oil and gas exploration, for new oil and gas exploration, and we're taking the next step for all oil and gas exploration. So, of course, when I met the banks, when I discussed this a couple of years ago, when we took this decision, they were all a bit shocked.
Yeah.
I mean, you have key clients. How can you have to promote export? That's your mission. But now, when I meet the same banks, they all agree. No one finance calls today.
Yeah.
So I think you have to be brave enough to be the first mover, and I think we are actually.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I mean, it's also how you actually assess risk, of course, and you're dealing with public money. If your assessment of the risk of oil and gas is that this is not a good bet over the next coming short term and long term, then actually you're making a right decision rather than just being sort of moralistic about something. Yeah, so that's really important. 2050 is a long way ahead. How do we drive action now? Give me a glimpse into one or two things that would really drive stepped up ambition domestically but internationally in terms of what you do. Yes?
Shall I start?
Yep, sure.
No, I think sustainable finance is about three things, basically. It's stop financing fossil fuels, and it's mobilizing capital to green financing, but it's also engagement. And I think this engagement is incredibly important because we need to, as we have sort of a societal sort of mission, the banks have that, and we have a mission to sort of promote the export industry. We have to bring them along. So we need to sort of understand their problems to make this transition and engage in doing that. For instance, in Sweden, and I think we talk a little bit too less about it, actually there has been a huge plan made to make the whole industry fossil free. And there are 22 different sector plans to, for instance, produce green steel and to make the transport sector green and to make the construction sector green. And as a financier, you need to understand how these transition actually sort of plays out. And we need to learn about the risks and how we can de-risk and how we can support. So we need to be into that sort of industrial change. And we need also to be into, which we already are, into developing countries' challenges to make big infrastructure projects bankable. That is already today very, very challenging.
Yeah.
But if we want to accelerate project financing and export financing into all parts of the world, we need to make those projects bankable.
Yeah.
And there we have to cooperate with the World Bank and others, I guess.
Just to explore a little bit on that, I think that's something that we have the responsibility to do, is to raise the awareness of export credits. I mean, according to ICC's latest white paper, the export finance industry yearly amount to $700 billion US. So, showing that it's an important player that can be used for financing. But the challenge is that we have, and it is the same size as development finance.
Yeah.
The challenge is that we're working side by side, and we are not cooperating. So I think that is a challenge. We have to start cooperating to finance the projects together.
I mean, in my perspective of it, I mean, as a bank, I mean, it's about long-term relations. We have had customers for hundreds of years in some cases, and we want to have them coming 20 or 200 years for that matter as well. So you mentioned risk of losing business here and now. I would rather say that, I mean, the risk is in the long term that if we don't engage, if we don't stay together with our customers and drive this change together by now sitting down specific per industry, setting tangible targets, setting credible pathways together with the customers, I mean, then we will transform together. Again, being a relationship bank. And by doing that, it's not about losing business today, it's about winning business in the long term, 5 and 10 years, while we're driving towards society's goals. And I mean, yes, that's the sweet spot, it sounds perfect, but that's what we will do, because that is what we want to do. And we have set objectives, again, 2030, so that is what we're steering towards. Which makes me, I mean, both proud but humble, because it's, again, you mentioned it, I mentioned it, we all know it's a big task, and we have some challenges along the way.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, this is the third day of COP26, and finance has sort of become a priority issue.
Yes.
So the burden is on us to really sort of push corporates. So we will become users of their data, climate data, and we will sort of push them by sort of innovate also financial products that they can use in their transition. And I think that it has happened a lot of things just the latest year, actually. We're moving from only green loans and green bonds and the social bonds, and we're moving into sustainability-linked bonds and loans, which I think is so interesting because it's more of emotion. It's not this is green and this is not green, but the sustainability-linked loan is connected to the targets of the corporates. So they need to have actually climate targets which is scientifically sort of proven, based. And then you can link a loan to actually fulfilling those targets. And if you fulfill them, you get a good interest rate. And if you don't, you have a higher interest rate. So in that sense, you sort of can meet the demand for actually transforming with financial products. And I think that's very interesting. And I think we have only seen the beginning of that type of innovations. We're looking at an export credit that is green as well.
Yeah. No, this is really fascinating. And it's great to see these products coming because there are many people that are looking for products to invest in, whether it be just high net worth individuals, but also, I was pointing at myself there, but I'm not a high net worth individual. Dream on, Nick. My brother is though, he's a doctor in Canada. And anyway, and companies too. So the people are looking for these products. I wondered, one thing I wanted to come back on because I didn't want to forget it here. I mean, one of the hottest topics at COP26 is the bit of unfinished business with the Paris Climate Agreement, which is called Article 6, but for everybody else it seems to be carbon markets, voluntary but also formal. Does your world operate in following this? Do you have some interest in this? Is it important?
Oh yes, we that's sort of the driving force for both SEK and EKN. And one of the things, because we are good at financing, we know how to structure deals, but we don't know so much about the scientific in climate. So what we have done is that we have set up a scientific climate council for supporting SEK and EKN in making decisions. We want to make decisions based on facts and on science, and that has really been helpful. So one of the things that we are discussing right now is a role of natural gas in energy transforming in developing markets. So that's very useful. So yes, the Paris Agreement is sort of what we are working towards.
Absolutely. I mean, it's when we set our targets. I mean, we are in the middle of society, and we want to drive towards society's goals, and that's the very foundation of the targets that we are setting. So it's absolutely key, and also a little bit like you say on scientific or other competences. What we see now in the financial industry to really understand and how to set these targets and how to steer the portfolios. I mean, we are onboarding competence which we have never onboarded before. We have just our first climate specialist we onboarded 2 years ago, Stefan Henningsson. Long experience from WWF working with climate issues for 15-20 years. Right. This year we just onboarded our second climate specialist, one of the top climate names in Finland. So mixing these true climate experts with people, the bankers, the normal skills on credits or investments, and seeing them come together, I think it's one of the proudest things for me actually working with sustainability, because these people together, they drive change.
So we could now start talking about green jobs, right? Which is another fantastic
green
area
bankers.
As well. Green bankers, green jobs, and everything else. Yeah. Did you want to comment here?
Well, no, I just want to agree. And also about what you said in the beginning, this sort of hard work of integrating climate and the environment and sustainability into the financial decision.
Yeah.
That is hard work. And in a bank, the core is when you put a rating, a credit rating on a loan, because that decides what price, that decides how you fulfill all the regulations that you have as a bank.
Yeah.
And so you need to actually get your analysts who are doing that type of credit judgment and presenting it to understand climate. So it's a combination of specialists coming in, but it's also to integrate it into the entire bank thinking, sort of, and understand those risks, which are difficult. It's new for us, so we're learning.
Let me ask you, I mean, before we all came to COP26, we had a little heads-up briefing with Business Sweden, and it seems that Business Sweden, so the umbrella organisation, which you are all part of, I presume, had done some mapping work of, say, 10 economies around the world that they felt, you felt, the experts felt, I don't know who felt, but somebody felt, could be really helped by Swedish innovation and maybe de-risking as well through export credit agencies and what banks can do. I suppose some of the countries are not just developing countries, they're developed countries too. I think the United States came up. Is there a huge potential if you can get your exporting right, make it attractive, these products, to some of these more high-emitting economies, that you could extend what you've achieved in Sweden to so many other places around the world?
For sure.
Yep.
I mean, it's Sweden, or I would say the Nordics, we are the world leaders on sustainability in the financial sector, together with a few very strong other Dutch and French, UK banks. I mean, delivering that and inspiring the rest of the financial industry, going back to the principles for responsible banking, the Net Zero Banking Alliance. I mean, these are shaped and formed by Nordea or other of the front-running banks, and again, the Nordic Swedish banks are some of the best ones in the world. So when we set our targets, when we participate in alliances setting target guidelines for the Net Zero Banking Alliance, the rest of the world, they look at us. How did you come up with those targets? Why did we write that in the target setting guidance or protocol? How will it work in practice? I mean, they're calling us, we're having bilateral meetings.
Yeah.
So really, we are exporting the financial sector target setting, ambition level across the globe. And we should, because we have the competence, and we need to lift up either banks in regions with less competence. I mean, you work a lot in emerging markets, but also smaller banks in the Nordics or Europe who aren't really there yet. We're lifting them, we're inspiring them, we're setting the agenda, we're driving it. We should be proud of it.
Yeah.
Maybe I can give you a concrete example.
Yes, please.
Because as you mentioned, the Swedish technology often involves a very high capex, and particularly for developing countries, the cost of capital is extremely high, as we just heard in the panel before us. But we have one example where we have actually gone together, Team Sweden, Sweden, SEK, EKN, focusing, and that was on Angola. Angola is a very large market. It's the seventh biggest country in Africa, 30 million inhabitants, a young population, growing in economy. It's an oil-producing and a fossil-dependent country, particularly for electricity distribution. So they have decided to focus on renewables and wanted to invest in a big solar project, the biggest in Sub-Sahara, consisting of 7 sites, 370 megawatts. And they needed the equipment and the knowledge from Sweden, but from Hitachi Energy, that was guesting here just before us, but also from other small and medium-sized companies in Sweden. Of course, this kind of project that is of that size is very difficult to finance sort of within the international banking market.
Yes.
Because the risks are considered very high. And here we collaborated, SEK and EKN, with the guarantees from the Swedish government and with the funding from SEK. And we also cooperated with a South Korean export credit agency and South African DFI, the South African Development Bank. And together we could offer a package, a funding solution for this investment that was very favorable, of course, for Angola as well, with very long tenors and a better attractive cost of funding as well. So I think that is a very good example how you can use the Swedish technology
Yeah.
and you use the financing sources that we have, and we collaborate internationally and also with DFIs to make this happen.
Yes.
So, and that's Angola is now increasing their new renewable. This will be up and running already in 2022, and they are meeting the SDG 7 as well, electricity to a lot of people in the country. So I think
sounds
it's very,
really cool,
and I think
yeah.
that is, you have to be concrete. You have to show good examples.
Yes.
That's how you make a change.
And we need those, right? We need those.
them.
There's too many people go, not enough's
Yeah.
happening. Yeah.
I can give you an example where we haven't succeeded yet. And that is waste to energy. I mean, it's quite fantastic. If you go back like 30 years in Sweden, we had really tough laws on how you need sort of to progress that type of energy. A lot of innovation on a municipality level. So we have a fantastic sort of waste to energy system in Sweden and in the Nordics, I should say. So here we have tried to export this, but it's really sort of a system type of export. And we have been to India many times. They have a big waste problem, and we tell them actually we import waste. And are you kidding us? So it's like we're trying to get away from a social problem and to create renewable energy. But the problem here is that it's a whole system, and you need to sort of apply a little bit of an eco-governance thinking. And I think Sweden is quite strong on that. So that is something that we try to export. It's difficult, but we try to get other countries sort of to have that knowledge as well.
Let me come back on one aspect of all this. I mean, the Paris Climate Agreement is clear about what we have to do, but it's obviously not completely that clear on specifics, you know? And so that's fine because each country has its own circumstances and blah, 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 blah. But what's also clear in the Paris Agreement is that we don't just need wind power and wave power and renewable energy. We don't just need the electrification of transportation, but we also need to work with nature. That we will never hit that net zero without land, soil, all these other things, oceans coming on. Is that part of your work? Do the nature-based assets of the planet feature in your activities as a bank on the export side of things?
Now,
out of curiosity, sorry, pure curiosity.
No, it's a great question. I mean, as you indicate, we are here, everybody is talking about the green lending or climate perspective, and yes, climate is the big topic, and the climate is also where we and the entire sector has focused on the target setting mechanisms, but biodiversity, or even from the perspective of a just transition and the social aspects that come out of climate change or loss of biodiversity, that is something that we are very much looking into now and having discussions. I'm also sitting in the United Nations Environmental Program Finance Initiative Banking Board.
Yes.
That's long.
And with the nice Mr. Eric Usher. And
with the very nice Mr.
okay.
Eric Usher,
Yep.
the head of United Nations Environmental Program Finance Initiative. UNEP-FI. But that's the kind of questions we're discussing in this banking board. I mean, the climate questions, of course, also, but that discussion was more intense 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Because now we have launched the alliances and the target setting guidelines. So now the discussions there are, okay, what kind of target setting and guidelines do we need to have on biodiversity? We launched the first guide on biodiversity this summer from the UNEP-FI on that. We're also discussing next step social issues or financial inclusion in emerging markets. So everything ties together in the end of the day.
Yeah.
So we still have to focus on climate. We really need, we can't dilute until we really have grabbed and have solid target setting on it. But already now, yes, we need to start looking at biodiversity, social issues, how to set the targets, how to measure the impact from our actions, and find the solutions for the customers.
Oh, yes.
And actually, we are now talking about how we can find a renewable project that we can finance. But with with an ECA financing anywhere comes also a sustainability analysis, including all that. We look at the biodiversity, we look at human rights aspects, do people get compensated correctly if they have to move? All that comes with an export credit finance.
Right. Finally, maybe we can look at where you all fit into the landscape of the other big banking thingies. Thingy is a good English word. It covers everything. German it's Dinger, isn't it? Where do you fit in with the World Bank, the multilateral development banks, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and things like that? I mean, they're supposed to be out there de-risking as well. And yeah, sometimes they get a bit of bad press, but they're also doing some good work as well. Is there a relationship between what you do and these multilateral development Bretton Woods institutions?
Absolutely. I mean, in many of the projects that export credits are used, there are also development banks.
Yes.
And very often the development banks are sort of coming in quite early and doing a lot of the work, and then we work together. But as I started, there is a need to actually double the project finance that we do today to reach the level that we need to invest to reach these net zero targets. So we need to double what we do today in anything. So we need to double that. So we need to cooperate a lot better, and we need to sort of have a better common agenda, I think, in these projects. Because now we could sort of more come in and work jointly in projects. But now I think we need to line up better together.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, we see the organizations being involved in the same transactions, but I couldn't say that we have a proper cooperation, and I think that is actually what we need. And we are also, even in Sweden, starting to look how we can cooperate with the Swedish aid organization.
Yes.
We have to collect all sources and focus.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of work to do there.
I could just tell you a story just briefly, but when I was working for UNEP in Kenya, there were some lovely flower farmers, Dutch flower farmers in Kenya, and they had gone to the north of Kenya to a place called Turkana, which was made famous in The Constant Gardener, that book by John le Carrier, and they noticed that the wind there is not intermittent. It's a unique feature of the landscape there that the wind blows all the time, perfect for wind power. And they decided that they wanted to invest in what would be the biggest wind farm in sub-Saharan Africa. It took them in the end about 20 odd years to get it up and running. Because what people don't know is, it's not just getting the money, it's persuading Vesta, for example, that it's okay to put those turbines on bumpy roads, or trying to persuade, say, the government or another overseas development agency to pave a road from Mombasa, the port, and then who pays for the interconnector? To link the wind farm to the grid. And is the grid able to handle it? And so suddenly you realize there's a cascade of effects. It's not just building a wind farm, right? It's all these other things that come in that people need help on. And particularly if you're flower farmers and you've never built a wind farm before. Yeah.
May I, Nick?
By the way, it is built, by the way.
Coming back to the collaboration part between, Nordea, we are a universal bank, but also we have started to look into those kind of collaboration with the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund. And actually, for just 3 months ago, very recently, we did the first ever collaboration with the European Investment Fund, where we now offer green loans to business banking customers in Finland and in Sweden at reduced rates. So that is a very nice example of a private commercial bank like Nordea coming together with the European Investment Bank and European Investment Fund, creating solutions that is better for the customers and that drives capital towards Paris agreements. So I think that's it's something completely new, never done before.
And I think we will see. Did you do it with Ericsson? Somebody's done it with Ericsson as well. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe I've got this wrong.
I cannot comment on any customer relationships anyway. So
very excited though. I think it's a brilliant idea.
Yes.
It really is excellent. These kinds of innovative projects, whether in rich countries or poorer countries, green mortgages that they did and piloted under Calderon when he was president of Mexico, all these things can unlock completely different dynamics in this area. And you reward people for doing the right thing as well, which is so critical. Yeah. Okay, maybe you wanted us to go on and on and on, but I think we could just take a few questions from the floor, and then we could, please come, Sam. Oh no, you're going to actually hand it to the people, not to me. I've already got a microphone. Silly old me. All right, anybody got any questions in the audience? Anybody? No? This lady here. It always takes one person to have the courage before the deluge starts of questions.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, my name is Sarah Nyberg, and I have the question. I'm involved with the technology mechanism of the UNFCCC, and which consists of, among others, the CTCN, so Climate Technology Center Network, and they work a lot with developing and transferring climate technologies from developed countries to developing countries. So I just wondered, I don't know, I'm from Sweden, but I don't know so much about the SEC and EKN. But do you have any collaboration with the CTCN, or do you think that would be a good idea? Maybe start collaboration with them.
Brilliant idea. We don't have that, but as we talk about collaboration, that is sort of collaboration in many different ways. And this is, we are working together with a lot of different actors nowadays, and this could be a brilliant idea to start to work with. We need to understand where we can sort of look for the business.
Since time is running out, I just give you one more example on where we have sort of supported the movement of technology. And that's the city of Abidjan, where they decided to build a transport system, a new bus transport system, where we could collaborate with, so we could support Scania, who has buses run on biofuel. And we could also support the building of the infrastructure, training of the drivers, the whole package. I think that's a very good example, but we will continue. That's a good idea. We should speak afterwards.
Yeah, sure. The CTCN has a pavilion right over there.
Great.
And hasn't the UNFCCC just launched an innovation hub as well? There's a new baby in their family.
Maybe. There are also like youth innovation labs, which started last year, where young people contribute with innovative ideas. Also a project of them, but...
Well, if anybody had any money for the CTCN, it would be a brilliant idea, because, so often the UN system is starved of investment and cannot really fully achieve its whole ambition. So, anybody else got a question? Anybody else? Don't be shy. No? I know it's comfortable here, but you're here because you have a job, which is to ask a question. No? Okay, that's fine. You clearly covered absolutely everything. I just want to say thank you very much indeed for being here. I think it's a really interesting area because you're actually on the front line. You are you're in the vanguard of basically changing some of the dynamics of finance in this world. And I think that Lord Nicholas Stern of the Grantham Institute in April, on one of our We Don't Have Time shows actually, said that he thought that the finance had now finally tipped into the decarbonisation space, into the green economy, and he put it down to round about 3 or 4 years ago, when the net zero target started being set. And he reckons 150 organisations with $150 trillion worth, pointing in that direction. And my question to him was, where can we see it being spent? Please show us where it's being spent, It's always the question. But I think what you're doing is part of actually starting to spend and focus that money on transforming economies. So thank you very much indeed, and thank you to you, the audience, and anybody else who's been tuned in to this live show. Give everybody a big hand here, please.